In the 17th century, the geopolitical map of Western India was dominated by titans. To the north, the Mughal Empire possessed vast wealth and a military force of hundreds of thousands. To the south, the Adil Shahi Sultanate controlled deep resources and entrenched regional power. Between them sat tiny, isolated pockets of local resistance. For any local leader seeking independence, the math was brutal. Facing these immense imperial armies in an open field with conventional tactics was a recipe for total destruction. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj completely understood this arithmetic. He looked at the massive cannons, the armored cavalry, and the volume of imperial troops, and realized that fighting on their terms was a trap. If brute strength guarantees defeat, you have to rewrite the rules of engagement. You have to invent a system where an enemy's massive size actually works against them. To carve out an independent state against these global superpowers, he would have to master asymmetrical warfare, turning the giants' weight into their own greatest weakness. His solution on land was Ganimi Kava, a specialized form of guerrilla warfare. Instead of lining up in open fields, his forces weaponized this geography, using speed, surprise, and the jagged terrain of the Western Ghats to outmaneuver heavy imperial columns. The ultimate test of this theory came at the Battle of Pratapgarh. The Adil Shahi Sultanate sent their towering general, Afzal Khan, along with a massive conventional army to crush the rebellion. Knowing his forces couldn't survive a direct clash, Shivaji Maharaj engineered a tense truce negotiation. He agreed to meet the general in a tent, isolated from the main Adil Shahi army. During the embrace, he deployed a hidden bagnak, a concealable brass weapon with sharp, curved spikes resembling tiger claws. This single, precise strike neutralized the general instantly. Without their commander, the massive Adil Shahi forces collapsed into chaos and were dismantled by the waiting rebel troops. He applied this same principle of targeted disruption to imperial finances. In 1664, his forces bypassed heavy Mughal defenses to sack the wealthy port city of Surat, draining the treasury and directly funding his own expanding army. Ganimi Kava was a systemic philosophy. By relying on localized surprise and rapid mobility, a small force could bypass heavy armor and render numerical advantages useless. Guerrilla raids are effective for winning battles and draining resources, but a state cannot be governed and territory cannot be held through hit-and-run tactics alone. To secure permanent infrastructure, he built an interconnected network of over 300 mountain forts. Placed at strategic choke points, they controlled the valley trade routes and collected revenue to sustain the state. Built directly onto steep mountain ridges, these fortifications forced invading armies to fight uphill against vertical stone, making them immune to traditional siege cannons and heavy infantry assaults. This decentralized fortress network functioned as an immovable anvil. When paired with the swift hammer of his guerrilla cavalry, it allowed a relatively small rebel force to exert permanent geopolitical pressure. That pressure soon extended from the mountain peaks to the coastline. Western India's maritime trade was lucrative, but constantly threatened by heavily armed European naval powers and local cities' forces. Recognizing the vulnerability of an exposed coast, he commissioned a coastal fleet and fortified island bases, establishing himself as the father of the Indian Navy. The masterpiece of this naval strategy was Sindhu Durg. Constructed on solid ocean rock off the Malvan coast, it allowed his forces to project artillery power far offshore and secure vital shipping lanes. Back on land, his ability to evade control was tested in 1666. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb had lured him to Agra and placed him under strict house arrest behind towering imperial walls. Rather than fight the heavily armed guards, he smuggled himself and his son out of the fortress by hiding inside large woven fruit baskets meant for charity. Whether projecting naval artillery onto the open ocean or slipping quietly out of a maximum security imperial lockdown, his greatest weapon was exploiting the rigid, predictable blind spots of heavily bureaucratic empires. By 1674, decades of this multi-domain warfare had exhausted the Mughal and Adil Shahi forces. Every attempt to crush the movement had failed. High in the mountains at Raigad Fort, he was formally crowned as Chhatrapati, the sovereign of his own independent state. With his territory secure, he pivoted from military defiance to state building. He replaced feudal systems with a structured cabinet of 8 ministers and implemented a merit-based system for military pay, ensuring the state was governed by law rather than individual whim. These combined efforts forged the Maratha Empire, a power structure that would eventually expand to replace Mughal dominance across much of the subcontinent. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj proved that true sovereignty is rarely granted by possessing the largest army. It is built through the brilliant asymmetrical application of geography, strategy, and a state structured to outlast the giants that once surrounded it.